It was one of those crisp early mornings where the sun barely peeked over the horizon, casting a golden glow that made the road ahead look like something out of a dream. The quiet of the early hours wrapped itself around Michael Carter, a 52-year-old retired U.S. Army general, as he drove his sturdy SUV down the highway. His fingers lightly gripped the steering wheel, the familiar sensation of the road beneath the tires calming him. He'd left his home hours ago, the house still dark as he pulled away, his mind already drifting to the day ahead. But in the back seat of the car, something more pressing awaited his attention. Strapped securely with a thick belt was a heavy steel safe. It was no ordinary safe. This one had been in his family for generations, a piece of history that held more than just valuables. It held his life. Inside, tucked among the personal documents, military awards, and family heirlooms, were pieces of his past that no one else could ever understand. To anyone else, it was just a hunk of cold metal, but to Michael, it was a piece of his soul. The safe wasn't just locked tight. It was fortified. A complex system inside the box would trigger an alarm if anyone dared tamper with it. And to make sure no one could easily get away with it, there was a failsafe, a spray of indelible paint that would mark anyone who tried to break in, leaving them with a visible reminder of their mistake. It wasn't something he ever expected to use, but it was there as a precaution he hoped he would never need. As Michael cruised along, the hum of the tires against the asphalt was the only sound that accompanied his thoughts. He was enjoying the quiet, the solitude that came with being out on the open road. The chaos of the world seemed far away. No meetings, no endless demands, just the peace of the highway stretching ahead. But that calm didn't last long. From the corner of his rearview mirror, he noticed the unmistakable glare of red and blue lights. The flashing lights grew brighter as they approached, the sound of a siren cutting through the silence of the morning. Michael's heart rate quickened, the peaceful atmosphere now replaced by a creeping sense of unease. He glanced at the speedometer. No speeding, no traffic violations. He was in full compliance with the rules. So why was he being pulled over? Seriously, he muttered under his breath. He could feel the tension building as he gripped the wheel tighter, trying to remain calm. With a sigh, he eased his SUV onto the shoulder, gravel crunching under the tires as he slowed to a stop. The patrol car pulled up behind him, its engine idling as the officer inside prepared to step out. Michael couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He'd been stopped by the police before, but this felt different. The officer who stepped out of the car was tall, stocky, and in his late 40s. His uniform was crisp, his face set in a permanent scowl, like he had seen it all and wasn't impressed by much. Michael didn't know it yet, but this wasn't going to be a routine stop. "Morning, sir," the officer called out, striding toward Michael's window with the kind of purposeful gait that suggested he meant business. Michael rolled the window down just enough to speak, keeping his hands visible on the steering wheel. The officer's eyes immediately flicked to the back seat, where the bulky safe sat, securely strapped in. "That's an interesting piece of cargo you've got there," the officer said, his voice cool but laced with suspicion. "Mind telling me what's inside?" Michael's calm demeanor never faltered, even as he felt a pang of irritation at the officer's tone. "Good morning, officer," he replied, his voice even and controlled. "It's just personal items. Nothing illegal, I assure you." The officer didn't seem convinced. He raised an eyebrow, his eyes narrowing. "Personal items in a safe, on the back seat. That's a little unusual, don't you think?" Michael's patience thinned, but he kept his voice steady. "Unusual doesn't make it illegal." The officer smirked, clearly unimpressed. "Well, how about you open it up for me, just to make sure there's nothing dangerous in there?" Michael's blood pressure ticked up, but he kept his expression neutral. He could feel the tension building, a silent battle of wills unfolding. He wasn't about to give in to this man's demands. "I'm sorry, officer, but I'm not opening anything. I'm not required to. There's no probable cause." The words hung in the air for a moment, the tension palpable. The officer's eyes hardened, his posture stiffening. Michael knew he'd just pushed the wrong button. "Now, listen here," the officer began, his tone shifting to something more aggressive. "I've seen a lot of strange things out on this highway, but a safe riding shotgun, that's got suspicion written all over it." Michael felt his heart rate spike. The words were meant to intimidate, and for a moment they did. He could feel his grip on the steering wheel tighten, but he fought to keep his composure. "I'm not breaking any laws, Sergeant. If you've got a reason to detain me, say so. Otherwise, I'd like to be on my way." The officer's gaze flicked from Michael's eyes to the back seat, then back again. The silence between them stretched out, thick with unspoken tension. Finally, the officer turned on his heel, striding back to his patrol car. Michael watched him, trying to steady his nerves, but something told him this wasn't over. Without a word, the officer reappeared, this time holding a crowbar in his hands. He twirled it with a smug expression, as though this was all part of his routine. Michael's gut clenched. He had no idea what the officer was planning, but it didn't feel good. The officer walked toward the back passenger door, a gleam of determination in his eyes. "All right, let's see what's so important that you can't let me take a peek," he said, his voice thick with authority. But Michael was already out of his seat. His eyes locked on the officer's, his body tense with readiness. The moment felt like it was hanging in the balance. He stepped in front of the door, blocking the officer's path. "Don't touch it." Michael's voice was low, his words laced with warning. "That's my property. You have no right." The officer's smirk twisted into something more dangerous. "Oh, I think I do." Michael's heart was pounding now, a heavy weight pressing on his chest as he saw the officer inch closer, brandishing the crowbar like a weapon. The sharp metallic clang of it against the air only heightened the sense of danger. "You're making a mistake, Sergeant. A big one." But it was too late. The officer wedged the crowbar under the edge of the safe with a grunt, applying pressure as he tried to force it open. The sound of the metal straining filled the air, and that's when it happened. A faint hiss, followed by a sharp burst. In an instant, the air was filled with the smell of something acrid and unmistakable. Bright green paint exploded from the safe, a jet of it hitting the officer square in the face. The officer's eyes widened in shock, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. The paint sprayed across his uniform, his face, his hands, covering him in a thick, vibrant green coating. The officer stumbled backward, his mouth open in disbelief, the paint dripping down his face like a grotesque mask. From the side of the road, a blue sedan slowed, its driver, Jason Cooper, stepping out with his phone in hand. He was grinning, clearly recording the entire scene with amusement. "Is everything okay here?" he called out, his voice light, almost mocking. Michael stepped aside with a wry smile. "Transparency is important," he said, his voice calm, even as the officer flailed in the background, his frustration growing with every second. Jason didn't hesitate. He zoomed in on the scene, the officer's paint-splattered appearance quickly becoming internet fodder. Michael could hear the officer's angry muttering as he stormed back to his patrol car, green paint dripping from his uniform, but it was too late. The damage had been done. Jason had captured everything on camera. The officer's humiliation was already sealed. The next day, the video went viral. Back at the police station, Captain Robert Mitchell sat at his desk, staring at his computer screen in silence as the video played over and over again. His fingers drummed on the desk, the faint sound of the footage playing in the background. He didn't need to ask who the man in the video was. "You know who you harassed?" the captain asked, his voice cold. Sergeant Brooks didn't answer, his face pale. He could feel the weight of the situation closing in on him. "Michael Carter," the captain continued. "Retired Army general, decorated, and now, the internet's newest hero." Brooks swallowed hard, the reality of what had just happened dawning on him. His career might not survive the fallout from this,